Millionaire mocks the gardener, but she silences him with one sentence. Tamika Johnson was kneeling among the red roses when she felt the icy water trickle down her curly hair. The cruel laughter echoed through the mansion's garden as she closed her eyes, trying to contain the anger boiling in her chest. "Thought you needed to cool off from this heat, Tamika," said Bradley Thompson, swinging the empty watering can with a mocking smile. "Or is the work too much for you today?" The other staff members present lowered their eyes, embarrassed by the scene. Tamika wiped her face with the back of her gloved hand and took a deep breath before standing up. For 3 years, she had endured this kind of humiliation, always in silence, always swallowing her pride. "I'm sorry, Mr. Bradley, I'll dry off and get back to work," she replied in a controlled voice. "You'd better. We have important guests arriving in an hour, and this garden needs to be flawless." Bradley adjusted his expensive tie and walked toward the mansion. "And wipe those water droplets off the rose petals. I don't want our guests thinking we don't know how to care for plants." Tamika nodded and returned to work. Every flower in that garden was like a child to her. For 3 long years, she had transformed that space into a true paradise. The red roses Bradley admired so much had been cultivated by her, a special variety that thrived in inland California's climate. But he would never acknowledge that. Necessity was stronger than pride. Tamika desperately needed that job. Her daughter Jasmine, just 16 years old, suffered from a rare condition that required expensive, ongoing treatments. Without the mansion's salary, she wouldn't be able to afford the medical care that kept her girl alive and hopeful for recovery. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. An hour later, the guests arrived in luxurious cars. Tamika watched from a distance as she finished trimming the grass around the yellow flowers. Bradley greeted a group of important local businessmen, all dressed in expensive suits and talking about deals in loud, confident voices. "Come see my garden," said Bradley, leading the group along the stone path. "I cultivate these flowers myself. It's a hobby that relaxes me after a tough day in business." Tamika clenched the pruning shears tightly. Those words were like daggers. Every rose, every flower bed, every color combination had been planned and nurtured by her. Bradley had never touched a single plant, except to pluck a flower and offer it to female visitors. "These roses are magnificent, Bradley," remarked an elegant blonde woman. "Where did you learn to grow such a special variety?" "Oh, it's natural talent," he replied, puffing out his chest. "And a lot of dedication, of course. I spend hours here every day." The brazen lie made Tamika bow her head and pretend to focus on her work. She knew if she looked directly at Bradley right then, she wouldn't be able to hide her outrage. "Dad, can you stop with these ridiculous lies?" The voice came from the mansion's porch. Brittany Thompson, Bradley's daughter, descended the steps with firm strides. At 22, she had inherited her mother's beauty, but possessed a strong temper that often put father and daughter at odds. "Brittany, go back inside," Bradley muttered through clenched teeth, trying to maintain his smile for the guests. "No, Dad, these people deserve the truth," she pointed at Tamika. "That woman right there is the one truly responsible for this garden. She works from dawn till dusk while you sit in the air conditioning making up stories." An awkward silence fell over the group. Bradley turned red with anger, but he couldn't make a scene in front of the important guests. "Jasmine, we'll talk about this later," he said in a low, threatening voice. "Yes, we will," she crossed her arms. "And maybe you'll learn to give credit where it's truly due." The guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. The situation had become far too tense for a social visit. Bradley managed to steer things around by changing the subject and leading everyone inside, but Tamika saw the promise of consequences in his eyes. Later, as the sun began to set, Tamika was watering the white flowers when Jasmine approached. "I'm sorry for what my father did today," the young woman said, sitting on the nearby stone bench, "and I'm sorry he never acknowledges your work." Tamika stopped watering and looked at her. Jasmine had always been different from her father. Where Bradley was cruel and arrogant, she showed kindness and sensitivity. "No need to apologize, dear Jasmine. Your father is my employer. He can do as he pleases, Tamika replied, returning to her work. No, he can't. No one has the right to humiliate another person like that. Jasmine stood up and gently touched one of the red roses. These flowers are yours, not his. Everyone should know that. What matters is that they're beautiful and healthy. Tamika smiled softly. The plants don't care who gets the credit. But you should care, Jasmine insisted. You have talent, Tamika. These flowers are more beautiful than any garden I've ever seen. That night, when she arrived home on the outskirts of town, Tamika found Vanessa lying on the couch, paler than usual. The girl had spent the whole day with joint pain, one of the symptoms of her condition. How was your day, Mom? Vanessa asked weakly. Same as always, my love. Tamika kissed her daughter's forehead. But I managed to save a little extra. Tomorrow we'll buy that new medicine the doctor mentioned. Mom, I know it's hard putting up with that man just for my sake. Vanessa held her mother's hand. If you want to find another job, don't talk nonsense. Tamika brushed the hair from her daughter's face. That job pays well and lets me take care of you, that's all that matters. But as Vanessa slept that night, Tamika lay awake thinking of Jasmine's words. How much longer could she endure Bradley's humiliations? How much longer could her dignity withstand the constant attacks? The next morning, she arrived at work earlier than usual. She loved these quiet moments in the garden, when she could work in peace without Bradley's intimidating presence. She was pruning the rose bushes when she heard voices from the office window. You can't fire Tamika, Dad, Jasmine's voice carried. I can and I will, Bradley replied. That woman is getting too bold. And you defending a servant in front of guests, that's the height of bad manners. Tamika isn't bold. She's the most polite, hard-working person I know. Jasmine raised her voice. And I won't stay quiet while you humiliate her. You will stay quiet, or I'll cut your allowance and you'll learn what real work is. Bradley's voice was thick with threat. As for the gardener, my decision is made. Next week she's out, and I'm hiring that famous landscaper from Los Angeles. Tamika felt her world collapse. Her legs weakened, and she had to lean on the stone bench to keep from falling. Without that job, she wouldn't be able to afford Vanessa's treatment. All the sacrifices, all the humiliations, it would all have been for nothing. Dad, this isn't fair, Jasmine kept arguing. Tamika has worked here for 3 years. She transformed this place? That's exactly why I'm hiring a real professional. Bradley laughed scornfully. Can you imagine how beautiful this garden will be in the hands of someone who truly knows what they're doing? Tears began to stream down Tamika's face. She stepped away from the window and walked to the back of the garden, where there was a small greenhouse she had built herself to protect the most delicate seedlings. There, away from prying eyes, she allowed herself to cry freely. It was in this greenhouse that she kept her greatest treasures, rare seeds collected over the years, special seedlings she had cultivated, and small plants she hoped one day to take to a garden of her own. But that dream seemed further away than ever. Tamika? Jasmine's soft voice made her turn quickly, trying to hide her tears. Miss Jasmine, what are you doing here? Tamika wiped her face with her apron. I heard the argument. Jasmine stepped into the greenhouse and looked around in awe. Wow, I had no idea you had all this here. Just a few plants I've been bringing home, Tamika downplayed it. Nothing special. Jasmine gently touched a rare orchid blooming in a small pot. Tamika, my father can't do this to you. She turned with teary eyes. I'll talk to my mother. Maybe she can make him change his mind. Don't get involved, sweetheart. Tamika shook her head. It'll only make things worse for you. But it's not fair. Jasmine stomped her foot. You have a daughter to take care of. He can't just... Life isn't always fair. Tamika smiled sadly. I learned that a long time ago. That afternoon, as she worked under the scorching sun, Tamika was caught off guard by a sudden storm. Dark clouds formed quickly in the sky, and rain began to pour down. She rushed to protect the most delicate flowers, covering them with tarps and rearranging pots that could be damaged by the wind. When the storm passed, the garden was partially destroyed. Several rose bushes had been damaged, flower beds were soaked, and some of the most beautiful blooms had lost their petals. Tamika looked at the wreckage with a heavy heart. She knew Bradley would blame her for it, even though it was completely beyond her control, and it didn't take long for her prediction to come true. What kind of mess is this? Bradley appeared in the garden, his face red with anger. How could you let this happen? Mr. Bradley, it was the storm. I tried to protect everything I could, but... Tamika began to explain. I don't want excuses, he cut her off sharply. A week ago, I warned you we needed to install a retractable cover for the plants. You said it wasn't necessary. The accusation was completely false. Tamika had suggested exactly that months ago, but Bradley had refused, calling it an unnecessary expense. Now, faced with the damage, he rewrote history to avoid responsibility. Sir, I suggested the cover last year, but you said... Tamika tried to defend herself. Are you calling me a liar? Bradley stepped closer, fists clenched. First incompetent, now you're being insolent too. Dad, stop it, Jasmine came running. Tamika isn't to blame for the weather. Stay out of this, Bradley pointed at his daughter. And you, he turned back to Tamika, have until the end of the week to fix this mess. If you can't, start looking for another job. Tamika spent the rest of the afternoon working alone to salvage what she could from the garden. Many plants were beyond saving, but she worked miracles with what remained. By the time she finished, it was night, and her hands were bruised and caked with dirt. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just getting started. Now, back to the story. The next morning, Tamika arrived at work determined to prove she could restore the garden. She had spent the night planning which plants to use, how to rearrange the flower beds, and where to replant the damaged rose bushes. But when she got there, she found Bradley talking to a well-dressed man she didn't recognize. Ah, Tamika, Bradley said with a fake smile. I'd like you to meet Mr. Brandon Williams, the most famous landscaper in Los Angeles. He's here to evaluate the garden. The man greeted Tamika politely, but she could tell Bradley had already made up his mind. Their conversation the night before hadn't been an empty threat. He really intended to replace her. The garden has incredible potential, Brandon remarked as he walked among the plants. With a few modifications and proper investment, it could become something truly spectacular. Exactly, Bradley agreed. That's why I need a real professional taking care of it. Tamika kept working in silence, trying not to listen to their conversation. Every word felt like a slap in the face, confirming that all her years of dedication meant nothing to Bradley. This variety of rose is very interesting. Brandon stopped near the red flowers that were Tamika's pride. Where did you get the seedlings? Oh, that... Bradley hesitated for a moment. A special contact. Trade secret, you understand? Tamika bit her tongue to keep from saying she had developed that variety herself, crossbreeding different types over 2 years of trial and error, but she knew her word wouldn't stand a chance against Bradley's. Well, I should get going, Brandon said, taking his leave. I'll prepare a proposal and email it to you later today. After the landscaper left, Bradley approached Tamika with a triumphant look. You might want to start thinking about packing your things, he said with a cruel smile. Next week we'll have a real professional working here. Can I at least finish restoring the garden after the storm? Tamika asked, keeping her voice steady. Why bother? Brandon's going to redo everything anyway, Bradley shrugged. Consider this your last week. That night, Tamika came home devastated. Jasmine was in the kitchen trying to make dinner, but her hands were shaking from weakness. Mom, are you okay? The girl noticed her mother's distress. I'm fine, sweetheart, Tamika forced a smile. Let me finish cooking. But Jasmine knew her mother too well. Something happened at work, didn't it? She pressed. Tamika couldn't lie to her daughter. She told her about the impending dismissal, the famous landscaper, and how small and disposable she felt. Jasmine hugged her tightly, and mother and daughter cried together in the small kitchen. Mom, we'll figure it out, Jasmine said, trying to comfort her. We always do, right? Yes, sweetheart. We always do. Tamika brushed the hair from her daughter's face. But right now I don't know how we'll pay for your treatment. I can stop the medicine for a while, Jasmine suggested. Absolutely not, Tamika was firm. Your health comes first. We'll find another job, you'll see. But deep down, Tamika knew it would be hard to find something that paid as well as her job at Bradley's mansion. Jobs for people like her, without formal education, were scarce and poorly paid. Over the next few days, Tamika kept working in the garden as if nothing had changed. She tended to every plant with the same care as always, knowing these would be her last moments in a place that had become so important in her life. Then, one sunny afternoon, Vanessa, Bradley's wife, sought Tamika out. Vanessa had always been a reserved woman, rarely involving herself in household matters or interacting with the staff. But that day she seemed different, more determined. "Tamika, I need to talk to you," said Vanessa, looking around to make sure they were alone. "Yes, Mrs. Vanessa," replied Tamika, stopping her watering of the plants. "I know my husband plans to fire you." Vanessa got straight to the point. "And I want you to know I don't agree with that decision." Tamika was surprised. Vanessa had never shown any opinion about how Bradley treated the staff. "It's Mr. Bradley's decision, ma'am," Tamika said diplomatically. "No, it's the wrong decision." Vanessa stepped closer to the red roses. "I see how you care for this garden. I see the love you put into every plant. My husband may not recognize your worth, but I do." The words touched Tamika's heart in a way she hadn't expected. After 3 years working in that house, she had never received such sincere appreciation. "Thank you, Mrs. Vanessa," she said, her voice trembling. "I tried talking to Bradley, but he won't listen." Vanessa sighed. "Sometimes I feel like I don't even recognize the man I married anymore." For a moment, the two women stood in silence, sharing a mutual understanding of the difficulties of dealing with Bradley Thompson. "Tamika, I want you to know that if you ever need a reference for another job, you can count on me," Vanessa said before walking away. "Thank you so much, ma'am. That means a lot to me." That same week, Bradley organized a charity event in the garden. The occasion was for a local hospital, but Tamika knew his real motivation was to appear in the media as a businessman concerned with social causes. "I want everything perfect for Saturday," Bradley gave Tamika detailed instructions. "The guests are important people and I can't afford any embarrassment." "Yes, Mr. Bradley, I'll take care of everything," Tamika replied. "And you'll be working late on Friday, finishing the last details. No overtime pay, of course. Consider it part of your duties before you leave here." The casual cruelty didn't surprise Tamika anymore. He always found a way to make things harder for her, especially now that he knew about her vulnerability. On Friday, Tamika worked late into the night, arranging floral displays, cleaning every inch of the garden and preparing everything for the next day's event. It was nearly midnight when she finally finished, exhausted and with an aching back. When she got home, she found a desperate message from her neighbor. Jasmine had fallen ill during the night and needed to go to the hospital. Tamika rushed there, her heart pounding with fear and worry. "How is she?" she asked the attending doctor. "Stable for now, but we need to adjust her medication," he explained. "And unfortunately, the new medicine is more expensive than the last one." Tamika closed her eyes, feeling the weight of all her struggles crashing down at once. Without a job, how could she afford even costlier treatment? "Doctor, how long do I have to get the money?" she asked. "Ideally, we'd start next week," he replied, "but I understand financial issues can complicate things. We'll monitor the situation and see what can be done." Tamika spent the night by Jasmine's hospital bed, holding her daughter's hand and silently promising she'd find a way to get the money for the treatment. On Saturday morning, she had to leave Jasmine in the neighbor's care to work at Bradley's event. She arrived at the mansion with swollen eyes from crying and a heavy heart, but tried to focus on her work. The party was a success. Dozens of elegant guests strolled through the garden, praising the flowers and the event's organization. Bradley accepted congratulations with his chest puffed up in pride, as if he were responsible for every detail. "Bradley, your garden is simply stunning," remarked a high society lady. "What an incredible talent you have with plants." "Thank you, Mrs. Hamilton," Bradley smiled broadly. "It's a passion for nature, you know how it is." Tamika, who was serving drinks to the guests, had to step away to avoid hearing more lies. Every compliment Bradley received for his work was like salt in an open wound. That's when she spotted a familiar face among the crowd. It was Dr. Terence Marshall, the physician who treated Jasmine. He was accompanied by his wife, both elegantly dressed for the charity event. "Dr. Marshall," Tamika approached discreetly. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Tamika?" He seemed surprised. "You work here?" "Yes, doctor. I'm the gardener," she replied softly, embarrassed to be seen in that situation by her daughter's doctors. "Are all these beautiful flowers your work?" the doctor's wife chimed in. "Yes, ma'am," Tamika nodded timidly. "What marvelous work," she admired the red roses. "I've never seen such a lovely variety." Dr. Marshall looked around, impressed. "Tamika, you have an extraordinary talent," he said. "And how is Jasmine doing?" "Better, doctor. Thank you for asking." Tamika preferred not to go into details about the previous night's setback. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." He touched her arm gently before walking away with his wife. The party remained lively until late afternoon. Bradley gave an emotional speech about the importance of solidarity and made a symbolic donation to the hospital. Everyone applauded his generosity, unaware that the amount donated was less than what he spent on a single weekend. As the last guests left, Tamika began collecting glasses and plates scattered across the garden. She was exhausted after a sleepless night at the hospital and a full day of work, but she knew she had to clean everything before leaving. "Leave that for Monday," Bradley said, appearing behind her. "Or better yet, leave it for whoever comes after you." The coldness in his voice confirmed there was no turning back. Monday would officially be her last day of work. "Understood, Mr. Bradley," she agreed, placing the last glasses on a tray. "Oh, and Tamika," he called as she headed for the exit. "I hope you don't take any plants with you when you leave. Everything in this garden belongs to this house." The remark was a deliberate low blow. Bradley knew Tamika had nurtured some special seedlings in the greenhouse and wanted to ensure she didn't take anything of value. "I understand, sir," she replied with dignity. "Good. See you Monday, then." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. On Sunday, Tamika decided to visit the garden one last time before her official dismissal. She wanted to say goodbye to the plants she had lovingly cared for over 3 years. She knew Bradley wouldn't be home. He always traveled on Sundays to play golf at the club. When she arrived at the mansion, she was surprised to find Brittany sitting on the stone bench among the flowers. "Tamika," the young woman stood quickly. "What are you doing here today?" "I came to say goodbye to the plants, Miss Brittany," Tamika answered honestly. "I can't believe my father is really doing this," Brittany shook her head indignantly. "I tried talking to him again, but it's like talking to a wall." "Don't worry about me. I'll be fine," Tamika forced a smile. "No, you won't be fine. And I won't be fine watching this injustice happen." Brittany crossed her arms. "I have an idea." "What idea, miss?" "I'll talk to my mother so she can convince my father to change his mind." Brittany seemed determined. "She has influence over him when she wants to." "Brittany, I don't want to cause problems in your family," Tamika tried to dissuade her. "The family already has problems. My father is becoming more bitter and cruel by the day." Brittany sighed. "Sometimes I feel like I don't even know him anymore." The two walked in silence through the garden. Tamika gently touched each of her favorite plants, memorizing the colors, textures, and scents she loved so much. "Tamika, can I ask you something?" Brittany said after a few minutes. "Of course, sweetheart. Why did you put up with my father's humiliations for so long? Why didn't you look for another job?" Tamika stopped in front of the white roses and thought about her answer. "Because I need the money to take care of my daughter," she said simply. "And also because this garden has become part of my life. Every plant here is like a child to me." "You have a daughter?" Brittany seemed surprised. "You've never talked about her." "I do, Jasmine. She's 16 and..." Tamika hesitated, unsure if she should mention her daughter's illness. "And what's wrong with her?" "She has a health condition that requires constant treatment," Tamika decided to be honest. "That's why I need this job. Without the salary, I can't afford her medicine." Brittany fell silent for a moment, processing the information. "Tamika, this changes everything," she finally said. "My mother needs to know about this. She would never let my father fire someone under these circumstances. Please don't tell anyone, Tamika pleaded. I don't want people to think I'm using my daughter to gain sympathy. It's not sympathy, Tamika. It's humanity. Brittany touched her arm. And it's something my father seems to have lost a long time ago. That evening, Brittany confronted her parents during dinner. Vanessa was serving dessert when her daughter brought up the subject. Dad, I found out about Tamika's daughter's situation, she said bluntly. What situation? Bradley cut a slice of pie without looking up. She has a sick daughter who needs expensive treatment. That's why she puts up with your humiliations. Bradley shrugged indifferently. Employees' personal problems aren't my concern, he said. I pay the salary, she does the work. It's a business arrangement. How can you be so heartless? Brittany slammed her hand on the table. Brittany! Vanessa tried to calm her daughter. No, Mom. Someone needs to tell him the truth. The young woman turned to her father. You're firing a woman who's worked here for 3 years, who turned our garden into a paradise, just because your ego can't handle that she's more competent than you. That's enough. Bradley stood up from the table. I won't tolerate disrespect in my own home. Disrespect is what you show Tamika every single day. Brittany also stood, and I won't stay silent about it anymore. You will stay silent, or you can find somewhere else to live. Bradley pointed at his daughter. Bradley, stop, Vanessa finally intervened. Don't threaten our daughter. And you stay out of decisions that aren't yours. He turned to his wife. That gardener is gone on Monday, and that's final. On Monday morning, Tamika arrived at the mansion knowing it would be her last day. She had spent the weekend looking for other jobs with no success. No one offered a salary close to what Bradley paid her. She found Brandon, the landscaper, already working in the garden with a team of assistants. They were uprooting several plants to replace them with new ones. Excuse me, Tamika approached Brandon. May I take some seedlings from the greenhouse? They're plants I developed and I'd like to keep them. Brandon glanced at Bradley, who was watching everything from the porch. I'm sorry, but I've been ordered not to let anything leave here, the landscaper said awkwardly. These are the owner's orders. Tamika nodded and headed to the greenhouse to say goodbye to her special plants. She found Brittany inside, watering one of the orchids. He won't let you take anything, will he? The young woman asked. No. But it doesn't matter, Tamika lied. They're just plants. They're not just plants, they're years of your work, your love, Brittany said, tears in her eyes. This isn't fair. Life isn't always fair, child. Tamika repeated the same words she had spoken days before. But it should be, Brittany insisted. The two stood in silence for a few minutes, admiring the plants Tamika had nurtured with such care. Tamika, can I ask you something personal? Brittany finally said. Of course. Why does my father treat you so badly? What kind of person humiliates someone who only does good? Tamika looked at the young woman and saw sincerity and pain in her eyes. Brittany truly didn't understand her own father's cruelty. Some people need to belittle others to feel big, Tamika answered wisely, and some forget that we're all equal inside. But he wasn't always like this, Brittany sighed. When I was little, I remember him being different, kinder. People change, child. Not always for the better. At lunchtime, Bradley appeared in the greenhouse where Tamika was packing her personal tools. So, how are you feeling on your last day? He asked with a sarcastic smile. Fine, Mr. Bradley. Thank you for the opportunity, Tamika replied with dignity. Opportunity? He laughed. I should be thanking you for helping me realize I needed a real professional to care for my garden. I hope you'll be satisfied with the new landscaper, Tamika continued, packing without looking at him. Oh, I'll be very satisfied, Bradley stepped closer. He's already improving things you never got right. The lie was obvious to both, but Bradley seemed pleased to deliver one last humiliation. Tamika, he said as she turned to leave the greenhouse, I hope you don't hold a grudge. It was just business. She stopped and turned to meet his eyes. I don't hold a grudge, Mr. Bradley, she said calmly, but I do hold sadness. Sadness? Why? Because in 3 years working here, I've learned you have everything money can buy, but not what truly matters. And what would that be? Kindness, compassion, the ability to see the worth in people. Tamika paused. You have a beautiful garden, but an empty heart. Bradley was taken aback for a moment. He hadn't expected such a direct and profound response. "Cheap philosophy from someone who has nothing," he finally said, trying to regain his composure. "Maybe," Tamika smiled sadly, "but I'd rather have nothing and keep my soul than have everything and lose my humanity." With those words, she left the greenhouse, leaving Bradley alone among the plants she had tended with so much love. Later that same day, as Tamika gathered her last belongings, she received an unexpected visitor. It was Vanessa, Bradley's wife, who rarely came to the garden. "Tamika, may I speak with you?" Vanessa asked quietly. "Of course, Mrs. Vanessa. Brittany told me about your daughter," she said directly, "and I want you to know I don't agree with my husband's decision." "Thank you, ma'am. That means a lot to me." "I want to help," Vanessa continued. "I can recommend you to some friends who need a gardener, and if you need money for your daughter's treatment—" "You're very kind, but I can't accept charity," Tamika politely interrupted. "It's not charity, it's recognition for your work," Vanessa insisted. "You transformed this place. My husband may not admit it, but I see the difference." "Thank you so much, Mrs. Vanessa." Truly. The two women exchanged a look of mutual respect. In 3 years, this was the first truly intimate conversation they'd had. "Tamika, may I ask an indiscreet question?" Vanessa said hesitantly. "Of course. How do you manage to keep so much dignity after everything my husband has done to you?" Tamika thought for a moment before answering. "Because I know who I am, Mrs. Vanessa," she finally said, "and no one can take that from me." When the time came to leave for good, Tamika walked through the garden one last time. Every flower bed, every tree, every bloom held memories of the past 3 years. Here she had found peace, purpose, and even moments of happiness, despite all the hardships. Brittany found her near the red roses, the flowers that symbolized all her work in that place. "Tamika, before you go, I want you to know something," the young woman said, her eyes glistening. "What is it, sweetheart?" "You changed my life." Brittany took her hands. "Seeing how you faced difficulties with dignity taught me what it really means to be strong." "You were already strong, Brittany, you just needed to realize it. And I also learned my father isn't the man I thought he was," she sighed sadly. "But you're the person I hope to become." They embraced for a long moment. At that instant, Tamika realized her time in that house hadn't been in vain. Even amid humiliation and pain, she had touched a young woman's heart and planted seeds of kindness and justice. "Take good care of yourself, Brittany," Tamika said, "and remember, true wealth is right here." She touched the girl's chest. "Don't ever let anyone make you forget that." Tamika left the mansion carrying only a small bag with her personal tools. She took no plants, as Bradley had instructed, but she carried something far more valuable: the certainty she had done her best, even under the hardest circumstances. In the weeks that followed, Tamika searched for work tirelessly. She visited dozens of homes, offering her services as a gardener, housekeeper, cleaner, anything to pay the bills. But reality was harsh. Without formal references and little schooling, opportunities were scarce. Jasmine watched her mother's struggles with growing worry. The girl had improved somewhat but still needed expensive medication. With each passing day without work, their financial situation grew more desperate. "Mom, what if I stopped treatment for a few months?" Jasmine suggested one afternoon. "Don't even think about it," Tamika said firmly. "Your health is priceless." "But the money's running out," the girl insisted, "and I can't stand seeing you suffer because of me." "None of this is your fault, my love," Tamika hugged her. "We'll figure it out. We always do." But for the first time in years, Tamika didn't know how they would. Savings were dwindling fast and bills kept piling up. Rent for their small home, electricity, water, food, Jasmine's medicine. Everything seemed impossible to cover with what little remained. Then, an unexpected call came. It was Vanessa Thompson. "Tamika, how are you?" the elegant voice asked. "I'm well, Mrs. Vanessa, and you?" "I'm fine, thank you." "Tamika, I called because I have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" "A friend of mine, Mrs. Helena Foster, needs someone to tend the garden at her ranch. She lives inland near Santa Barbara. The job includes housing and a salary. Interested? Tamika's heart raced. A job opportunity when she needed it most. Very interested, Mrs. Vanessa. How can I reach her? I'll give her your number. Mrs. Eleanor is a very kind person. I'm sure you'll get along well. Thank you so much, Mrs. Vanessa. You're saving me. It's the least I can do after everything you've been through in our home, Vanessa sighed. Tamika, I want you to know that not everyone in the Thompson family agrees with my husband's behavior. 2 days later, Tamika was in a van on her way to inland California to meet Mrs. Eleanor Foster. The farm was in a small town surrounded by crops and lots of greenery. The scenery reminded Tamika of her childhood in the countryside before moving to the city. Mrs. Eleanor was a 70-year-old widow who had lived alone on the farm for 5 years with just one housekeeper. She welcomed Tamika warmly and showed her the garden that needed tending. I couldn't keep up with the plants after my husband passed away, Mrs. Eleanor explained. He was the one who took care of everything. Now it's all a bit neglected. Tamika looked around and saw the potential of the space. The garden was truly abandoned, with many dead plants and overgrown beds. But there was a good structure, fruit trees, space for a vegetable patch, and a small pond. It's a beautiful place, Mrs. Eleanor. With a little work, it can be lovely again. Do you really think so? The woman's eyes lit up. It's been so long since I've seen flowers here. I'm sure of it. The plants are just sleeping, waiting for someone to care for them. Mrs. Eleanor offered her the job on the spot. The pay wasn't as high as what Tamika had received from Bradley, but it included a home for her and Jasmine, and the woman seemed genuinely kind. Can I bring my daughter? Tamika asked. She's 16 and undergoing medical treatment. Of course you can, Mrs. Eleanor smiled. An empty house needs life. And as for the girls' treatment, we have a very good hospital in the neighboring town. Tamika returned to Los Angeles with her heart full of hope. She had finally found a chance to start over, far from the humiliation and close to the nature she loved so much. When she shared the news with Jasmine, the girl was thrilled. Mom, are we really going to live on a farm? She asked, her eyes shining. Yes, my love, it'll be a new life for both of us. And can I help you in the garden? Of course. I'll teach you everything I know about plants. Tamika hugged her daughter. You'll see how good it feels to work with the earth. In the following days, Tamika organized the move. They didn't have many belongings, so it was relatively simple. But before leaving Los Angeles for good, she decided to make one last visit to Bradley's mansion. She wanted to see how the garden was faring under the new landscaper's care, and to say a proper goodbye to Brittany, who had become special to her. When she arrived at the mansion, she was shocked by what she saw. The garden was completely different. Brandon had ripped out nearly all the original plants and replaced them with an entirely new design, much more modern, but lifeless. The rose bushes Tamika had nurtured with such care were gone. In their place were geometric beds with exotic plants that looked expensive but had no personality. The garden resembled a magazine spread more than a living space. Tamika? Brittany came running when she saw her standing at the gate. Hi, Brittany. Tamika smiled sadly. I came to say goodbye. I'm moving inland. I'm glad you found work. Brittany hugged her. And I'm glad you're leaving this city. It only holds bad memories for you. How's the new garden? Tamika couldn't help but ask. It's awful. Brittany made a face. It looks like a cemetery. No life, no color, no love. And my dad keeps pretending he's happy, but I can tell he misses your garden. He's happy. That's what matters. No, he's not happy. None of us have been happy since you left, Jasmine sighed. The house feels colder, you know, like life left with you. The plants will grow, and the garden will be beautiful in its own way. It'll never be like it was before. Jasmine shook her head. And you know the worst part? My father knows it too. I can see it in his eyes when he looks at those lifeless plants. At that moment, Bradley appeared on the porch and saw Tamika at the gate. He came down the steps with a stern face. What are you doing here? He asked sharply. I came to say goodbye, Mr. Bradley. I'm moving inland, Tamika replied politely. Great. I hope you have more success there than you did here, he said sarcastically. "Daddy, stop," Jasmine intervened. "And you, get inside," Bradley pointed at his daughter. "I don't want you talking to former employees." "She's not just a former employee, she's my friend." Jasmine crossed her arms defiantly. "Friend?" Bradley laughed scornfully. "Since when does an employer become friends with a maid?" Tamika felt anger boiling inside her. For 3 years she had endured every humiliation in silence, but seeing Jasmine scolded for showing kindness was too much. "You know what, Mr. Bradley?" she said, looking him straight in the eye. "You're right about one thing." "What's that?" He seemed surprised by the change in her tone. "An employer doesn't become friends with a maid, but a brother should treat his sister with more respect." The silence that followed was deafening. Bradley turned pale as if he'd seen a ghost. Jasmine looked back and forth between them, confused. "What did you say?" Bradley stammered. "You heard me right," Tamika continued firmly. "I'm your sister, Bradley. My birth name is Tamika Johnson Thompson. Our mother gave me up for adoption when I was 6 months old because she couldn't raise 2 children." "That's a lie." Bradley shook his head desperately. "It's not a lie." Tamika pulled a yellowed birth certificate from her bag. "Here's the proof. Our mother's name was Dorothy Johnson Thompson. She died when I was 12, but before that, she left this certificate and a letter explaining everything." Jasmine stared at the document, wide-eyed. "Grandma Dorothy had another child," she whispered. "Yes, sweetheart, me," Tamika confirmed. "I came to work here to meet my brother. I was curious to see what kind of man he'd become, but all I found was an empty man who measures worth by money." Bradley staggered and had to lean on the gate. "This can't be true," he murmured. "It is. And you know what's even sadder?" Tamika continued. "Every rose you dismissed, I grew thinking of the mother I barely knew. Every humiliation I endured, I forgave, hoping one day you'd recognize the same blood in me. But all you see are numbers, never people." Tears streamed down Jasmine's face. "Tamika. I mean, Aunt Tamika," she managed between sobs. "That's right, sweetheart. I'm your aunt, the sister your father never wanted to know." Bradley was in shock. All his arrogance had vanished, replaced by utter despair. "Dorothy, our mother," he whispered. "She never told me about you." "Because she was ashamed," Tamika explained. "Ashamed she couldn't raise both her children, but she gave me a good family, one that taught me values you seem to have lost along the way." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Bradley asked, his voice breaking. "Because I hope to find a brother, not a cruel employer," Tamika replied. "I hope to find someone who honored our mother's memory, not someone who belittles others to feel important." Vanessa appeared on the porch, drawn by the raised voices. When she saw the scene, she rushed down. "What's going on here, Han?" she asked worriedly. "Vanessa." Bradley turned to his wife with tears in his eyes. "This woman, she's my sister." Vanessa was stunned. She looked at Tamika, then at her husband, trying to process the information. "What do you mean, your sister?" "Same mother." Tamika showed the birth certificate to Vanessa. "Given up for adoption as a baby." Vanessa read the document carefully, then looked at Tamika with deep sorrow. "Good Lord," she whispered. "And you worked here for 3 years, treated like that." She chose not to speak. Bradley tried to defend himself. "I chose to give you a chance to know me as a person," Tamika corrected him. "But you never saw me as a person, only as a servant to mistreat." Brittany walked up to Tamika and hugged her tightly. "Auntie, forgive me for what my father did to you," she said through tears. "Forgive me for taking so long to stand up for you the way you deserved." "You have nothing to apologize for, sweetheart." Tamika stroked her niece's hair. "You were always kind to me. Always saw my worth when your father didn't." Bradley sank onto the stone bench, completely shattered. His whole life, his whole identity, had been built on feeling superior to others. Discovering he'd humiliated his own sister for 3 years was a shock that shook him to his core. "Tamika," he tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "My name is Tamika, with a T," she corrected. "And now I need to go. My daughter is waiting for me to start our new life." "Wait," Bradley staggered to his feet. "You can't leave like this. We need to talk. We need—" "Talk about what?" Tamika interrupted. "About how you threw ice water at your own sister. About how you mocked my work in front of strangers. About how you threatened to fire me every time I showed an ounce of dignity." Each word was like a slap to Bradley's face. He remembered every incident, every humiliation he'd unknowingly inflicted on his sister. "I didn't know," he said weakly. "You didn't know because you never cared to know the people who worked for you," Tamika replied. "To you, employees don't have names, don't have stories, don't have feelings. They're just disposable parts." Vanessa approached Tamika with tears in her eyes. "Tamika, forgive me for what my husband did," she said. "And forgive me for never stepping in when I should have. It's not your fault, Mrs. Vanessa. You were always kind to me. But I could have done more. I could have stopped the humiliation." Vanessa shook her head. "I'm just as guilty as he is for standing by." "Aunt Tamika, do you really have to leave?" Brittany asked. "Now that we know the truth, everything can change." Tamika looked at her niece fondly, then at Bradley, who remained seated with his head in his hands. "Some things can't be undone, sweetheart," she said gently. "Some wounds are too deep to heal with simple apologies." "But we're family," Brittany insisted. "Family is built with love and respect, not just blood," Tamika explained. "For 3 years, I tried to build a bridge between me and your father. He chose to burn every bridge." Bradley finally looked up at his sister. Tamika, give me a chance," he begged, his voice breaking. "Let me try to fix—" "You had 3 years of chances," she replied firmly. "Every day you chose to humiliate me instead of knowing me was a missed opportunity. But now it's different. Now I know who you are. No, Mr. Bradley, now you know our relation. But who I am, you never wanted to discover." Tamika took back the birth certificate. "And who you are, I discovered these past 3 years. Money and power didn't make you a better person. They made you bitter and cruel." The heavy silence that followed was broken only by the sound of wind in the trees of the new garden, so different from the one Tamika had lovingly created. "Aunt Tamika," Brittany broke the silence, "can I come visit you inland?" "Of course, sweetheart, you'll always be welcome." Tamika smiled at her niece. "And you can bring your mother too. You'll love the farm." "What about my dad?" Brittany asked, glancing at Bradley, who remained silent. "Your father will always be my brother no matter what happened," Tamika replied after a pause. "But respect is earned, and that will take a long time, if it ever happens at all." Bradley slowly stood and approached Tamika. "At least let me help with your daughter's treatment," he pleaded. "She's my niece too." "Jasmine and I will be fine on our own," Tamika politely refused. "We've always managed, and we'll keep managing. But I have money. I can pay for the best doctors." "Money doesn't fix everything, Mr. Thompson," she interrupted. "And I don't want my daughter growing up thinking we need charity from those who mistreated us. It's not charity, it's family obligation. Family takes care of family always, not just when they find out they're related," Tamika said firmly. "You had 3 years to ask about my life, my struggles, my daughter. You never did. Now you don't need to pretend you care." The words hit Bradley like a punch to the gut. He vaguely remembered Tamika mentioning a daughter a few times, but he'd never shown interest in her personal life. I didn't know," he stammered. "You didn't know because you didn't want to," Tamika finished. "To you, I was invisible as a person, just the gardener who tended your plants and endured your insults in silence." Vanessa stepped forward again. "Tamika, no matter what my husband did, you're family now," she said. "And I want to really know my sister-in-law. Can I call you?" "Of course, Mrs. Williams. I'd love to talk." "And I want to meet my cousin Jasmine," Brittany added. "She'll be thrilled. She's always wanted a cousin." Bradley watched the women in his family arranging to stay in touch with Tamika while he was subtly excluded from the conversation. For the first time in his life, he felt small and insignificant. "Tamika," he tried again, "teach me how to make things right." She studied him for a long moment before answering. "I can't teach you that, Bradley," she said, using his name without Mr. for the first time. It has to come from within. You need to look at all the people you've hurt and ask yourself if that's the man you want to be. What if I change? What if I become a better person? Then maybe one day we can talk as siblings, she replied. But real change takes time, and I won't wait around to see if it happens. Tamika turned to leave, followed by Brittany and Vanessa. Bradley stood alone in the garden, surrounded by the expensive, lifeless plants he'd bought to replace his sister's work. Aunt Tamika, Brittany caught up to her at the gate. Will you ever forgive my dad? Tamika paused, considering her answer. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, sweetheart, she said, and it doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. Your father is my brother and always will be, but trust and respect are earned by actions, not words. I understand. Brittany hugged her aunt again. And I promise I'll make my dad a better person. Don't make promises for others, dear, Tamika advised. Everyone is responsible for their own choices. Then I promise I'll be a better person for having known you. Now that's a promise worth making. Tamika walked away from the mansion with dignity. She didn't look back, didn't show regret or sadness. She had said all she needed to say and was at peace with her choices. Bradley stood in the garden until nightfall, reflecting on everything he had discovered. For the first time in many years, he cried. He cried for the mother he had lost too soon. He cried for the sister he had mistreated without knowing. He cried for the cruel man he had become. When he finally went inside, he found Vanessa and Brittany talking in the living room. "Do you both hate me now?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "We don't hate you," Vanessa replied, "but we're very disappointed." "And sad," Brittany added. "Sad that you spent 3 years missing out on knowing a wonderful person because of your pride." "Can I try to make it right?" Bradley asked. "You can," said Vanessa, "but it'll be a long road, and in the end, Tamika may never fully forgive you." "I understand," he sighed. "I deserve that." "Dad." Brittany stood and touched his arm. "Aunt Tamika is an incredible person. She cared for that garden like it was her child. She endured your humiliation because she needed the job to care for her sick daughter. And still she never answered with rudeness, never disrespected you. I know that now." Bradley lowered his head. "And yet you treated her like trash," Brittany continued. "For 3 years you had the chance to know an amazing sister, but you chose to see only a servant to mistreat." "How can I live with that?" Bradley asked desperately. "By learning from your mistakes and becoming a better person," Vanessa answered. "Start by treating all employees with respect. Start seeing people as human beings, not objects." "Do you think there's still hope for me?" Vanessa and Brittany exchanged glances. "There's always hope, Dad," said Brittany, "but you have to earn it." Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Tamika was at Mrs. Eleanor's small farm, helping Jasmine settle into her new room. The girl was enchanted by the place, the fresh air, and the quiet countryside. "Mom, this is like a dream," Jasmine said, looking out the window at the green fields. "It is, my love. A fresh start for both of us." "And you're okay? After everything that happened today?" Tamika sat on the bed beside her daughter. "I'm relieved," she answered honestly. "I carried that secret for 3 years. Now it's all out in the open." "Do you think your brother can change?" "I don't know, Jasmine. And honestly, it doesn't matter much. What matters is we have a new chance to be happy. And we'll work together in Mrs. Eleanor's garden. Yes, I'll teach you everything about plants. Maybe you'll discover you have the same talent I do." Tamika smiled. "I want to learn everything, Mum. I want to be just like you. Not just like me, my love. Better than me, you'll have opportunities I never had." The next morning, Tamika woke early to explore the farm's garden. Mrs. Eleanor was already up, having coffee on the porch. "Did you sleep well, Tamika?" "Very well, Mrs. Eleanor. It's been a long time since I slept so peacefully." "And your daughter?" "She loves it here. Thank you for welcoming us so kindly." "Don't mention it. This house needed life," Mrs. Eleanor smiled. "Speaking of life, what do you think about planning what to do with this garden?" Tamika looked around and saw endless possibilities. Unlike Bradley's mansion, where she had to follow orders and whims, here she would have the freedom to create something truly her own. "I have so many ideas, Mrs. Eleanor. I could plant a vegetable garden, a flower bed, maybe even a small orchard. Do whatever you'd like, dear. It's been too long since this place bloomed. Tamika spent the morning walking around the property, imagining where to plant each type of flower, where to place the herb beds, and where to create a space for Jasmine to help without getting too tired. It was work she would do with love, not out of obligation. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. Later that day, she received a call from Brittany. "Aunt Tamika, how are you settling in?" "Very well, sweetheart. The place is beautiful, and Mrs. Eleanor is very kind." "That's wonderful. And how's my cousin Jasmine?" "She's loving the farm. She really wants to meet you." "And I want to meet her too. Can I come visit you next weekend?" "Of course you can. You'll be very welcome." "Auntie, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you miss the mansion, the garden you created there?" Tamika thought for a moment. "I miss the plants, the flowers I cared for so tenderly," she replied. "But I don't miss the sadness I felt there. Here, I'm building something new, something of my own. And my dad. Do you think about him?" "I do, Brittany. He's my brother, even after everything. But thinking of him doesn't mean accepting how I was treated. He's been really unwell since yesterday. I think he finally understands what he's lost. Sometimes we need to lose something to understand its value," Tamika sighed. "But some losses can't be undone." "Do you think you'll never truly be siblings again?" "I don't know, sweetheart. Only time will tell. But I know I won't sit around waiting for it to happen. I'm living my life, taking care of my daughter, building my own garden." That night, Bradley was in his office staring out the window at the new garden. The expensive, exotic plants looked cold under the artificial light. There was no life there, no soul. Vanessa walked into the office carrying a box. "What's this?" Bradley asked. "Some of your mother's things I found in the attic," she said, placing the box on the desk. "I thought you should see them." Bradley opened the box with trembling hands. Inside were old photos, letters, and documents. Among them, he found a picture of his mother holding 2 babies. "That's me and Tamika," he whispered, touching the photo gently. "And here," Vanessa pointed to a yellowed letter. "A letter your mother wrote explaining why she had to give Tamika up for adoption." Bradley read the letter in silence, tears streaming down his face. His mother described the pain of having to give up her daughter, the hope that one day the siblings might reunite, and the immense love she felt for both her children. "She suffered so much," he murmured. "And Tamika suffered too," Vanessa added. "She grew up without knowing her biological family, without knowing where she came from. And when she finally found me, I mistreated her." Bradley buried his face in his hands. "But she never gave up on you." Vanessa touched her husband's shoulder. "For 3 years she endured your humiliation, hoping you'd see her as a person. And I was too blind to see it. Now your eyes are open," Vanessa said. "The question is, what will you do about it?" Bradley stayed awake all night, reading and rereading his mother's letter, staring at the old photos, trying to process everything he'd discovered. For the first time in many years, he questioned who he really was and what kind of person he wanted to be. The next morning, he made a decision. He walked into the office determined and called all the staff for a meeting. There were gardeners, drivers, cleaners, security guards, people who had worked for him for years but whom he'd never treated with respect. "I want to apologize to all of you," he said, surprising everyone. "For years I've treated you poorly, as if you didn't matter. That was wrong, and it changes today." The staff exchanged confused glances. They'd never seen Bradley apologize for anything. "From today on, I want to know each of you," he continued. "Your names, your families, your needs. You are an important part of this company and deserve to be treated with dignity." It was the first step in a long journey of change. Bradley knew it would be hard to undo years of arrogance and cruelty, but he was willing to try. Meanwhile, at the farm, Tamika was teaching Jasmine how to plant sunflower seeds. "Why sunflowers, Mom?" "Because they always seek the light," Tamika replied. "No matter where they are, they always turn toward the sun." "Like us?" "Like us, my love. Always searching for the light, even when everything seems dark." The two worked in silence for a few minutes, planting the seeds that would grow into beautiful flowers in a few months. "Mom," Jasmine finally said, "do you think your brother can learn to seek the light too?" Tamika looked toward the horizon, where the sun shone brightly over the green fields. "Everyone can learn, my love," she answered. "Some just take longer than others. And what if he does learn? If he really changes? Then maybe one day we can talk as siblings," Tamika smiled. "But until then, we'll tend to our own garden." And so mother and daughter kept planting, caring for the land, building a new life far from the humiliations of the past. In the quiet green fields, they had finally found the peace they had been searching for. Months passed. The farm's garden flourished under Tamika's loving care. Jasmine improved significantly with the fresh air and tranquility of the countryside. And even from a distance, Brittany stayed in constant contact, visiting her aunt whenever possible. Bradley, meanwhile, was on a difficult journey of personal transformation. Some days were better than others, but he was determined to become a better man. One day, nearly a year after the truth came out, he decided to write Tamika a letter, not to ask for forgiveness. He knew he didn't deserve it yet, but to share the changes he was trying to make and to honor the memory of the mother they had both lost. The letter was never sent. Bradley realized words on paper weren't enough to show real change. If he wanted to earn his sister's trust back, he'd have to do it through actions, not words. And there on the farm, among sunflowers and rose bushes, Tamika built her own garden of hope, proving that even after the fiercest storm, there's always a new spring waiting to bloom. The end. What did you think of this story of siblings reunited under the most painful circumstances? Tell us in the comments if you believe Bradley can truly change and if Tamika did the right thing by leaving to start over far away. Your opinion means a lot to us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories.